Cincinnati Bengals. We got some scenarios here in Cincinnati, coming off a year where obviously Joe Burrow was injured, and we talk about the teams, trying to knock off the Chiefs. Well, the Ravens are one of those teams that can still do it, right? I mean, they lost by a touchdown in the AFC Championship just this year, which included a fumble at the goal line and Lamar Jackson making a bad red zone decision for an interception. It could have gone either way, right, at the end of the day. And the Bengals are the one team, or have the one quarterback who's still active, who has knocked off Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game.
Well, they're the one team that has actual history of being able to go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs and come out on top, more often than losing.
Yeah.
Literally, they're the only team to be able to do that, essentially.
So now the challenge with Cincinnati and these other teams that, like a Baltimore that just locked up Lamar Jackson for a lot of money, you've got Joe Burrow getting paid.
Yeah.
And so you don't have rookie contract quarterback anymore. So I think the Bengals, the Bills, the Ravens, they're some of the more fascinating teams to figure out because you got the quarterback locked up. We're not playing that game.
Right.
But you're trying to figure out what are the best ingredients around your highly paid quarterback to make this run. And now the Bengals at a big-time crossroads with T. Higgins as he hits free agency, and they have to decide, are we going to franchise tag him? Are we going to re-sign him? Are we going to try to tag and trade? What are we going to try to do with T. Higgins?
All these teams now, almost all these teams are in the same bucket in terms of they've all passed the point now of being able to, like, one way of trying to combat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs is if you can find the rookie quarterback or the rookie contract quarterback, right, and steal a march on them. Okay, you may have Patrick Mahomes, but you're paying him a large sum of money, even if it's not necessarily, where he deserves to be paid because of the contract he signed. But we can try and offset that because we're only paying our quarterback rookie contract money and we can put the money elsewhere. But you look at all the teams around, and we're now Lamar Jackson, second contract, Joe Burrow, second contract, Josh Allen, second contract, Justin Herbert, second contract. Like all the guys we're talking about that are going to try and beat the Chiefs, they're all in the same boat of they have that problem as well now. And actually, because the way Mahomes structured that contract, you could argue that Kansas City's actually in a better boat than the rest of these teams because their quarterback contract is actually more friendly than, say, Cincinnati and Joe Burrow's. But, yeah, and it's the same story for all of them. It's not that it's impossible. It just becomes harder. Like, you now have to make some difficult decisions every single year, say T. Higgins, and sometimes you're going to have to let the money make the decision for you and say, I would love to keep this guy around. On the other hand, you sort of look at the next, 2-3 years, we just can't afford to do it. We got to let him walk. And by the way, everyone keeps focusing, hey, T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd is on his way out as well. Nobody's even talking about that. Like, we're just saying bye-bye to Tyler Boyd, and it's a case of do you keep T. Higgins as well?
The other thing you're going to hear a lot in just from talking heads this offseason, the Chiefs set the pattern here, right? They got rid of their high-priced receiver. They didn't pay him, and they still won. And I caution everybody to not listen to such analysis. I do not believe that the Chiefs are a blueprint in any way because they do have the common denominator, not only Mahomes, but when they made that move, they went ahead. I mean, at the end of the Super Bowl, what are all the narratives? Okay, Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. He's goat chasing right now. And they've got a newly minted potential Hall of Fame defensive coordinator in Spags. And Andy Reid he's goat chasing too as far as the best coach of all time. Is he on his way? And it's like there's other pieces at play in Kansas City. And their ability to move on from Tyreek Hill opened the door to have what ended up becoming an historic defense, not giving up more than 27 points in any game. We haven't seen that, right? So all of those things add up. But I don't think just saying, hey, if you have a great quarterback, just forget receivers. I still think the reason why the Bengals were plays away from winning a Super Bowl was what they had in Jamar Chase, plus T. Higgins, plus Tyler Boyd, and then everything else that they've built around that. So those guys were so good that we forgot that the Bengals made it to the Super Bowl with a bottom 5 pass-protecting offensive line. That stuff doesn't happen, right? So I think Cincinnati has to be careful here. And when we talked about their draft last year, we said, okay, the term future-proofing came up a lot. And I think Cincinnati continues to have to be careful when they draft to draft high-value positions. Edge rusher last year, corner in the second round, getting a Charlie Jones and Andre Eusevis at receiver last year. Like, those guys will step in and have a chance to take some of Tyler Boyd and his production. But we still have a decision, I think, on Higgins and what the best play is there.
Yeah, so I forget how we've done these in the past. Are we assuming what teams will do, or are we just doing what we would do?
I think we're doing what we would want to do here.
I think in this case, certainly for me, I don't want to speak for you, in this case, I think those are two different things. So I think that the Bengals will franchise tag T. Higgins. It feels like this has been heading down the Jesse Bates pathway for a while, and they've said, look, we're going to put the franchise tag on him. We'll get one more, not cheap year out of him, but we'll get one more cost-controlled year that we know, and then we'll let him leave next offseason because we're not paying him the big money long-term deal. We'll try and get that 1 year out of him, and away he goes. Now, where it may differ from Jesse Bates is he's a wide receiver, and I think you might get trade offers if you franchise tag him in a way that I don't think they did with Jesse Bates. So maybe they still end up tagging him and then trading him away. Either way, I think that's how this begins, is they slap the franchise tag on him. I don't know that I would do that. If I'm the Bengals and I have a choice, much the way the Giants did a year ago, I have one franchise tag, I have multiple players that I need to keep in the building, I would put the franchise tag on DJ Reader before I put it on T. Higgins.
That's interesting because I'm over here looking at draft interior defensive linemen. I think where I would differ is I would say, okay, look, this is difficult, man, because we've spent a lot of the last 2 or 3 years talking about the Bengals offense from a team building standpoint. Lou Anarumo on the defensive side of the ball, defensive coordinator, has done a really nice job. They were never really stars on that side of the ball. You could argue Trey Hendrickson at edge has become a star. Jesse Bates, had star type of power, but they had done a really nice job stitching this together. But they had holes last year. The safety position was an issue without Jesse Bates, and DJ Reader has been a consistent impact player for them. So I don't hate the tag for Reader because we've seen his on-off and impact there. But my concern is I think you can get your run-stopping defensive lineman in the draft.
Can you, though? Isn't that the sort of thing that everybody that's what everyone preaches, and then the draft rolls around every year, and we're like, where are the interior players?
I mean, in the third round, second, third, fourth round. T'Vondre Sweat, if T'Vondre Sweat is there in the second round for Cincinnati, again, our strategy is never going to be like, oh, we'll let Reader walk because we're going to draft Sweat in round 2. But those guys theoretically are easier to replace. But Reader has been a massive impact for them, though.
And I think Reader is much more than just a run-stuffing defensive tackle. Like, the thing that makes Reader special is he's a player that can impact the game in both ways. Like, he's an absolute force in the run game, but he's also an impact player as a pass rusher as well. Not in the Aaron Donald type of mold, but he's a good enough pass rusher at his size to be able to push the pocket, to be able to create pressure, to be able to cause problems, disruptive, and play on all 3 downs. My concern with Reader is injury history. Like, he's had some injuries, and when he's not there, it's a problem. But, 29 years old, one of the very few players in today's NFL that can, I think, legitimately impact the game as both a run stuffer and a pass rusher, and they don't have any, you can't replace him with just a guy. You might be able to replace part of what he does with a second or third round player, but I don't think you can replace all of what he does with, forget second or third round. I don't think you can replace that in the draft.
So the other positions that need to be addressed, we mentioned the 2 wide receivers, but right tackle Jonah Williams also hits free agency. And the Bengals are also at this point where I thought they made good strides on the offensive line, but they weren't great again last year. So I think depth is going to be an issue, even though on paper they've got 4 out of 5 starters returning on the offensive line. I think you really want to keep that depth going. Jonah Williams currently, their last year's starting right tackle, currently 54th on the PFF free agent board. So who's going to be the guy that we give to every team?
Michael Onwenu.
Michael Onwenu.
He's the guy, unless now.
I thought you were going to say Josh Jones because we did that last year, and we'll play. I want to play that game again this year.
Well, Josh Jones, anyone that needs a left tackle should absolutely be signing Josh Jones, but I think he might actually be a left tackle only. As weird as that sounds in today's NFL, I think he might be limited to that one.
Not because of skill set, just because of however they're handling the position that from what we've seen so far.
Right, that one position on the offensive line is where he plays well. But what I'm curious about for Onwenu has the way he's been sort of treated by the Patriots. Is that indicative of how the entire league sees him? Are we looking at this guy who, for some reason, they're not 100% convinced he's even a starter? He's like a swing tackle, a guy that can play inside, outside. Or are the teams looking at this and saying, the PFF grades are insane. He's always played well regardless of where he's lined up. And when he's been at right tackle, he's been the best version of himself at 26 years old. Like, this is a cornerstone player that we can get for pennies on the dollar. So what is his market going to look like? Because if it's cheap, half the league should be jumping on this guy to sign.
We know that if he was a former first-round pick, the market would be stronger.
Right.
One of the things our guy Brad Spielberger talks about is your draft position actually affecting your market when you hit free agency. So as a former sixth-rounder, you're basically saying there are teams. Sometimes the league differs from our grades, right? They really look at PFF like you guys are idiots, right? Not every time, not most of the time, but sometimes they think that. Like, we still take crap for Evan Mathis, like still do. People still bring up we overgraded Evan Mathis. If that's the case for Onwenu, then maybe the market is better. The thing I would argue though is I would trust the grades. Because over time, better grades lead to more wins for your team, and more WAR leads to more wins. And Onwenu, in that case, if the league is undervaluing him, I believe it makes him undervalued as a guy that has been successful at both guard and at tackle.
Now, for what it's worth, if you go to PFF's free agent rankings, Brad Spielberger's contract projection for him is 4 years, $14.5 million per year, 33 guaranteed, $58 million total. So it's not.
And he's doing that not just based off grades, he's doing that based off conversations and trying to anticipate what the league is going to look at.
And that's kind of somewhere in the middle, right? It's like it's not bargain basement shopping, but neither is it $20 million a year for a solid starting tackle.
So, when I like the idea of Onwenu, if they could try Josh Jones at right tackle, maybe that's the way to go. When the Bengals are also picking at 18, they got a few extra picks this year. They're going to end up they have 9 total picks going into the draft. So they have pick 18 and then pick 49. There was a point earlier this offseason I was thinking Rome Odunze from Washington. Before he was getting more top 10 hype, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, man, that would be a nice fit for Joe Burrow. The way he catches the ball at the catch point, as a vertical threat opposite Jamar Chase. No matter what happens with T. Higgins, you're still trying to continue to add to that position. I wonder if he's even potentially there at 18. But if you get an Onwenu in the building, I think you have to try to fill those needs ahead of the draft, right? Always.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go into the first round saying I got to get my starting right tackle. If they can avoid that, then I think they have the option of receiver, more edge help, I think, potentially there. But either way, I'm talking.
They have a lot of cap space, which is unusual for a team. The ramifications of the Burrow contract haven't really hit yet. They're about to hit. And
you still have to anticipate that. You can't just say, we have a ton of cap space, let's spend it all here in 2024.
And part of that is, what we're talking about with the franchise tag, right? The franchise tag wipes out a giant chunk of that the second you apply it to whether it's T. Higgins or DJ Reader or whatever.
So somebody's getting tagged, that solves one of your short-term needs. Would love to see an Onwenu, a tackle in free agency, have that offensive line solidified. And then I think in the draft you have to get younger on the offensive line. The one thing the Bengals haven't done well is draft and develop offensive linemen, guys that they've drafted later rounds, and it's like, oh yeah, this guy's going to step in at a pinch. We haven't seen much of that from Cincinnati all that well. And then I think D-line, man, they got to continue to load up. Love Trey Hendrickson there, Sam Hubbard there, but I think just continuing to add more depth up front on that defensive line from a draft perspective.
Would you keep T. Higgins or not? I would use the tag on Reader and let T. Higgins.
I would tag Higgins.
Okay.
And also explore the trade market with the tag. And then if I had to make one more run with Higgins and Chase together and then lose him next year for a comp pick, I'd be okay with
I think that's their plan. I mean, that I think is what they're intending to do with that.
I stand with the Bengals.
Stand with Cincinnati. Yeah. I would let him walk, and then I think I would probably. I'm not sure what I would do to replace what you have. I think I like the potential of Yoshivas, the Princeton wide receiver from a year ago.
Princeton. We just called him Princeton last year. Yeah.
I like his potential. I'm not sure if he's ready to do it right now. So I don't know if you try and bring in a veteran receiver as like a bridge, to let him develop into that guy, or you just draft another one and say between the two of them, one of them will, step into that kind of role and be a solid T. Higgins imitation.
We're only at team 2, so I'm going to,
Perfect.
repeat myself a lot. The wide receiver market, I do believe, just the PFF free agent board, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Mike Evans. Then once you get to Marquise Brown, right? Even if you include Mike Evans' age, I'm starting to worry about the money for the Marquise Browns, the Calvin Ridleys. Then it's Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis and OBJ and Tyler Boyd. I start to worry about the money when that gets up into the $12 to $16 million range on multi-year deals for those guys. I would rather go to the draft.
One thing I think that's different about this year's draft class relative to certainly last year's, the size
and verticality.
Yeah, and when you're talking about replacing a T. Higgins, obviously he's a very specific type of wide receiver. He is a big-bodied, size type of wide receiver. Last year, we were talking about all these tiny receivers, right? Even the top guys, it was Jordan Addison, undersized. It was like Jackson Smith-Njigba he was a slot guy. And he was considered by many to be the number one wide receiver. Quentin Johnson was the only guy at the top with any kind of size, and apparently he's terrible. And then once you got beyond those big three, you got to Josh Downs and Tank Dell and Zay Flowers and these other small receivers. So the one thing that last year's class did not have is size and that type of receiver. This year, though, certainly once you start getting into the second round and those kinds of things, now you're talking about almost all that's there is size. A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy, even guys like Devontae Walker is a reasonably large receiver. Xavier Legette, there's a ton of these giant receivers.
Yeah, I would love to see Cincinnati double up. I mean, look, if you have, let's wrap it up on the Bengals. They had enough depth last year that first-round pick Myles Murphy was edge 3 on their team, right? Was in there as part of a rotation. Second-round pick cornerback DJ Turner. He was forced to play a little bit, but he was going to be a backup for a while. Cincinnati is going to start running out of those options as Burrow's contract goes further down the road. They're going to need more instant contributors. But I think they're still in this position where if they tag Higgins, double up on receiver again this year, right? And then it's like, okay, we'll get one starter out of the last 4 draft picks that we've made at receiver over the last couple of years. And then if they want to make a splash play after Higgins leaves, they could figure that out. But I think they can continue to attack these positions, ease guys in, give them, hybrid redshirt type of seasons.
Yeah.
And so by next year, hopefully DJ Turner's better after a year. Myles Murphy's better and more relied upon. I don't think they need as many instant impact players, but they're going to. They have to load up on those positions that they're eventually going to be losing players.
They've been very good as a franchise of future-proofing the roster and drafting for next year or the year beyond. The problem with that strategy is if you get it wrong, you're at a delay. You're like a lag of a year before you figure out that we screwed that up and now we need to go in a completely different direction. So Myles Murphy, for example, okay, you got some snaps from him last year, but this is the year where they actually need Myles Murphy to be good, and if he doesn't get any better this year, it's taken them a year to figure out that they might have made a mistake with that pick, and they could have gone a different direction. You know what I mean? It's slower to realize the impact of those moves. One last thing, we need to figure out who is the veteran low-cost tight end the Bengals are going to bring in.
Well, I was going to bring up something different. I was going to bring up, is Brock Bowers in play for Cincinnati?
I mean, if he lasts to 18, I would be all over that.
Bowers, in his lack of size, and again, we saw him at the Super Bowl, and he looks small.
He's not a big man. Now, relative to tight ends.
The draft is just hilarious, man, because we're going to have this conversation. I'm a team drafted in the top 10. Do I really want to spend this pick on Brock Bowers? But if I'm at 18, I really want Brock Bowers. Got to have that guy on my team. But I think that's in play for Cincinnati. We've seen him mocked to Indianapolis in the middle of the first, a couple picks earlier. If Brock Bowers is there, then we're solving maybe the T. Higgins problem in a different way, a different position. But again, just attack, flood the field with playmakers, and Bowers is one of them.
He's a guy, compared with me, Brock Bowers is a very large person. Compared with you, he looks like a child. And compared with Gronk, who he was standing next to at some point during the Super Bowl, he looks very, very small. That being said, the Bengals brought in Irv Smith last year. Irv Smith and Brock Bowers are very comparable in terms of size. 6'2", 6'3".
I liked that move that didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly. 200. But my point being, they've already shown previous that they're not going to let a 6'3", 240-pound type body scare them away from the tight end position. They think that a guy that has those types of receiving skills, even if he's, quote, only that size, makes sense within this offense. So, yeah, if Brock Bowers is there at 18, they should run that card in and absolutely make use of that.
I do think if they can, so let's attack right tackle in free agency.
Yep.
Let's get in Wenu.
Yep.
So that we could take the best playmaker available at 18 or an edge defender, a high value position in the middle of the first round.
And again, the same story with Baltimore. I think veteran free agent edge rusher is a real strength this offseason. And even if it's not in wave one, in the first couple of days of free agency in March, after June, there are going to be guys available in June that make sense to sign for a team.
First round corner could be in play too at 18.
Yeah.
I'd be fine with that too. I think there's 4 or 5 potential first round picks that could make sense there.
DJ Turner was a big flag flyer of the model last year.
Yeah.
Big model guy.
Disappointing first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you at all discouraged by that, or just rookie growing pains?
No, I'm discouraged by it.
Okay.
Turner was also a guy that I didn't love his film. Right. Yeah. So there was 2 model guys I said last year where my heart is saying no, but the model's saying yes. Right. They were on that end. It was Blake Freeland from the Colts.
Yeah.
And it was DJ Turner. Right. So I was like, the data says Turner. Yes. When I'm watching the film, I'm like, I like him. He's fine. But I didn't love him, right? Same thing with Freeland. I'm like, oh, man, he's going to struggle early. So far, my eye test has been truer than the data for those 2 particular players.
Okay.
Yes. But ready to add depth. All right, Bengals fixed.